Let's talk about Nike. I mean, the name itself pretty much means victory, and you can spot that logo anywhere on the planet. But what if I told you this entire empire, built on the idea of being the best, was actually started by a guy who considered himself a failed athlete? Yeah, it's a wild story. Let's get into it.
Okay, just to give you a sense of how massive Nike is today, look at this number. That's about 1,000 crore rupees, or if you prefer, over 120 million US dollars. That's how much money Nike makes every single day. It's an absolute giant. But trust me, it did not start out that way. Not even close. And this, right here, is the craziest part of the whole Nike story. You see the brand, you think of champions, right? The greatest of all time. But the whole thing was born from the mind of a man who had to accept that he was never going to be one of them. This is how that personal failure actually kick-started a global revolution. So let's go back. It's 1962, and we meet a 24-year-old Phil Knight. Now, this guy had spent his whole life running, dreaming of being a top-tier athlete. But he had to face the music. He was good, but he just wasn't great. His dream of competing at the highest level was over. But he couldn't just walk away from the world of sports he loved. He had to find another way in. So what do you do when you have a business degree and a broken dream? Well, you remember a paper you wrote for a class. The idea he had was pretty bold, but it made sense. He saw how Japanese cameras were crushing the German competition by being high quality and low cost. So he thought, hey, why can't we do that with running shoes? Take on the big German brands like Adidas that dominated the US market. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot he had. So with pretty much all the money he has, Phil Knight gets on a plane to Japan. Now you got to picture this. He's a shy guy, kind of an introvert, and he doesn't have a company, he doesn't have a business. He's just a guy with an idea, and he's about to walk into the headquarters of a huge Japanese shoe company, Onitsuka Tiger, and try to convince them to make him their American distributor. The nerve. And this is where it all could have just ended. The executives at Onitsuka are listening, and they ask him a simple question. So what's your company's name? And Knight just freezes. He's got nothing. Then, in a total panic, he thinks of the blue ribbons he won at track meets as a kid, the ones hanging on his wall, and he just blurts it out. Blue Ribbon Sports. The company was completely made up on the spot. But you know what? They bought it. The bluff actually worked. So Knight gets back to the States with a deal for some sample shoes. The first person he shows them to is his old track coach, the legendary Bill Bowerman. Now, Bowerman was a different kind of genius. He was obsessed with shoes. I mean, he would literally tear them apart, trying to make them lighter, faster, pouring rubber into his family's waffle iron to create new soles. He saw the Japanese shoes, heard Knight's plan, and immediately offered to be a 50-50 partner. And right there, the team was born. Knight the visionary and Bowerman the innovator. So the first shipment of shoes arrives. Knight and Bowerman are ready to go. But they hit a wall. Every single sporting goods store they went to said no, they wouldn't stock their shoes. So there they were. No store, no ad budget, just a basement filled with Japanese running shoes. So what did they do? Well, they did what any good entrepreneur does. They started to hustle. The early days were just a pure grind. Knight literally filled the trunk of his car and drove to track meets all over, selling shoes directly to the athletes. And guess what? It totally worked. The shoes started flying out of his trunk. They sold $8,000 worth in the first year. The next year, $16,000. But this success created a massive new problem. They were always broke. The company was growing so fast they were constantly on the edge of going out of business. It got so bad that Phil Knight had to get a day job as an accountant just so he could use his paycheck to keep his own company alive.
While all this was happening, Bill Bowerman was cooking up something special. He knew that runners needed more cushioning for all the miles they were logging on hard pavement. So he came up with a revolutionary idea. A shoe with a soft foam midsole that went from heel to toe, absorbing all that shock. He called it the Cortez. And man, it was a game changer. It wasn't just a great running shoe, it became a style icon. The Cortez put Blue Ribbon Sports on the map for real. So things were finally looking good. By 1971, sales were over $1.3 million. I mean, they were a real player in the shoe game. Phil Knight had finally quit his accounting job to go full-time on his dream. And that is when he got a phone call from Japan. A call that was about to change absolutely everything.
This was the message from Onitsuka. They saw how successful Blue Ribbon had become, and they basically wanted to take it over. They gave him an ultimatum. Sell us a controlling stake in the company you built from nothing, or we'll cut you off and find someone else. It was a total and complete betrayal. Knight was just floored. So Knight had a choice to make. He could give in and lose his company, or he could fight back. He got his tiny team together and made the riskiest decision of his life. He told them, "We're done selling someone else's shoes. It's time to create our own." They were going to walk away from their only supplier and bet everything on themselves.
So first things first, they needed a name. They were throwing around ideas like Falcon and something called Dimension 6. Then, their very first employee, a guy named Jeff Johnson, spoke up. He said he had a dream the night before about one word, Nike. You know, the Greek goddess of victory. It was short, it was strong, it was perfect.
Okay, so they had a name. Next up, a logo. They needed something that looked like motion, something that would look good on the side of a shoe. Knight found a local graphic design student to mock up some ideas. The team ended up picking this simple checkmark shape. Knight himself wasn't even crazy about it at first. His famous reaction was, "Well, I don't love it, but maybe it'll grow on me." And the price for what would become one of the most recognized symbols on Earth? Just $35. Incredible. With the new name and that swoosh logo, Nike just took off. By 1980, they'd done the impossible. They had passed Adidas and become the #1 athletic shoe company in the US. You'd think the story ends there, right? The struggle's over? Nope. A brand new challenger appeared, and they came out of nowhere. And that challenger was Reebok. See, while Nike was all about performance for serious athletes, Reebok saw something else happening. They saw the aerobics craze, the new trend of athletic wear as fashion. They made shoes that were stylish and came in all kinds of colors. And by 1986, it was working. Reebok's sales shot past Nike's. For the first time, Nike was actually losing ground. They had to lay people off, they were in trouble, and they needed a miracle. So Nike decided to bet the farm on a single counterattack, one that would completely rewrite the rules of sports marketing. They took a huge chunk of their budget, and instead of signing a bunch of stars, they put it all on one guy, a young, explosive, but still kind of unproven rookie in the NBA. They thought he was magic, and his name was Michael Jordan. And they didn't just give him a check. They built an entire brand around him, the Air Jordan. Before this shoe, basketball shoes were pretty much all white and, let's be honest, kind of boring. The Air Jordan was like a bomb going off in pop culture. It was bold, it was black and red, it was rebellious. It perfectly mixed top-tier performance with this incredible cultural swagger. It basically created the sneaker culture that we all know today. So, did the bet pay off? Oh yeah, $100 million. That's what the Air Jordan sold in its very first year. It wasn't a shoe, it was a phenomenon. The partnership with Michael Jordan didn't just save Nike, it launched them into the stratosphere, way past Reebok, and cemented them as #1, a spot they have never, ever given up since. In the end, Phil Knight himself really summed it all up. The story of Nike isn't really about a brilliant original idea. I mean, his idea came from a college paper. The real lesson here is about the execution. It's about the relentless grind, selling shoes out of a car, bluffing your way into a deal, and having the guts to start over when you get betrayed. And that, of course, brings us to these 3 little words. Just do it. It's so much more than a marketing slogan. It's the whole story of Nike, boiled down to its essence. It's a philosophy that was born from a failed athlete who, instead of just quitting, decided to do something. So it makes you wonder, right? What's your crazy idea that you should just do?